Hey. Yo. Dude! Can you make me something? I'm starving.
Did you not clearly see that I was sleeping?
Can you not clearly see that my belly's empty?
I don't know. It kind of looks full from here. Just go eat some cereal.
Think about it. The most efficient cooking would happen while you're asleep.
Yeah, having an open flame while I'm unconscious is a great idea.
Look, man, I'm just the entertainment factor. You're logistics.
I've made a grand total of 1 brisket in my lifetime, and that was 2 years ago on this channel. It was overall a success, but definitely not perfect, so here I am again. This time, I wanted to test what I've seen a lot of people do, which is smoking a brisket overnight. The problem is, I don't have a pellet smoker that can auto-regulate its temperature that you set it to. I just have this Big Joe charcoal smoker which you set using the vents, so it's kind of a guessing game. Anyway, I'm going to take you through what I did. I bought one of these nearly 20-pound prime briskets at Sam's. I always like to take the step of dry brining in my fridge at least overnight just to spread my workout. And in the case of brisket, it does help spread the seasoning throughout it, and it can make the bark a little better in my opinion. But first, I'm just going to take this carving knife and try to trim this up nicely. On the fat side, I'm taking a good bit of it off. Almost all the stuff on the top layer is just hard fat that you don't want to eat. And then down towards the end, I'm just trying to keep about a 1/4 inch of fat over the flat, which is what everybody recommends doing. And I'm just trying to be really careful to not create any craters or divots that would pool up with fat when you cook this. That would inhibit the bark being able to form as it's smoking. On the meat side, I'm taking off a lot of the silver skin that I see, and again, just trying to keep this very even. I take off most of the top layer of fat on this side just because you don't really need it. If you see any sharp edges or anything, you try to trim those up to keep this very rounded. That's going to help it to not burn. This takes me quite a while, like 30 minutes every time, just because I'm not good at it, but you don't have to spend super long, just try to get a little bit of trimming in. Now this is where most people just stick some mustard or any kind of binder on this and season it and then smoke it. I skipped the binder part because my seasoning is going to stick through the dry brining process. I'm sticking this on a wire rack so the air can circulate around it, and then I'm going to start by seasoning with salt. I always keep that separate from my rubs just because I want to be more precise with it. It's almost impossible to oversalt something this thick, so just be generous. You could just do salt and pepper, which is plenty fine in my opinion, but I'm just going to show you a little rub that I made. I'm starting with whatever leftover rub that I had from my last smoke, which I always have a little bit left over. I'm going to grind a ton of pepper into this because that's the main seasoning that I want to taste on my brisket. Maybe like 3 tablespoons worth, and then I'm going to add some Cajun seasoning, maybe like 2 tablespoons. Then about a tablespoon of dry mustard powder because again, I'm not using the mustard as a binder. And lastly, a couple tablespoons of brown sugar, and then I'm just mixing all that together. Evenly spread that over your brisket on both sides and make sure to press it in so it sticks. It looks beautiful, and this is the point where I'm going to take this to the fridge and let it sit at least overnight. I let mine go for almost 72 hours just because that worked for my schedule. So again, I'm going to start this the day before I eat it to let it smoke overnight, and that day I'm going to prep my grill the same way I always do. I'm going to clean out the ashes from the last smoke and then add a bunch more charcoal briquettes. I want quite a bit because I definitely don't want this to die overnight. And then when I'm getting ready to smoke this, which is around 9 p.m. for me, I'm going to grab my blowtorch and light all my charcoals. It takes about 5 minutes. Then I just close up the grill and open the vents so it can heat soak for about 15 minutes. At this point, I'm also adding my smoking wood, which is going to be a few chunks each of oak and hickory. Now I can build my double indirect smoking configuration. It's going to start with my heat deflector plates, followed by an X accessory rack, and then a pizza stone for the double indirect, and then a drip tray, and then my grilling racks. Now once again, I'm going to close this up and let this equipment heat up for about 10 more minutes. And I'll start trying to dial in my temperature, which I want to get to around 225 Fahrenheit. Normally I smoke between 250 and 275, but since this is going to be overnight, I want to be safe. I've definitely gotten better at honing in what temperatures I want and letting the grill settle, but this one took me a little while. It shot up and down a few times. Maybe I just wasn't patient with setting the vents and waiting to see what would happen. But once I felt it was getting close to 225, I went to grab my brisket and get that ready. And I'm not going to be super worried about perfect temperature because of this little guy right here. It's a meter probe. This is where I would transition into an ad for this.
If I had one! Sorry.
Anyway, this is a really nice piece of equipment that I'm going to stick into the largest part of the brisket to get the most accurate reading. It's controlled through an app on my phone, which I'm going to use to set for brisket. I want this to go all the way up to 205, and I don't need any alarms in between that. But what is nifty about this is I can set alarms for the ambient temperature. So basically this will ping me if the ambient temperature falls above or below a range that I'm going to set. My low spot was 205 and my high was 255. You can also set the do not disturb function on your phone to let certain apps come through it, and I set this app to go through it. So with that in place, I added my brisket to the grill, and I'm going to do one more hack. One thing I saw on YouTube was, instead of spritzing, which I can't do while I'm asleep, is taking some wood chunks and sticking them under the brisket to make it more sloped. It's just going to prevent any fat from pooling up and destroying the bark, and it's also going to help the fat run all over the brisket and keep it moist. So figured I'd try it. Now I'm off for the night. Time to get some Z's. So the app did ping me a couple times overnight, just like at midnight and 2 a.m., just when it was too low and then too high. All I had to do was adjust the vents and then it slowly fixed itself. It wasn't as bad as I expected it would be. I did wake up again at like 4:30 just out of intuition. At this point the brisket was hitting about 180 Fahrenheit, so that's a good time to wrap it. And I'm not going to fully wrap it like I did last time in butcher paper. I'm just going to do the foil boat. That is, getting a couple sheets of foil underneath it and then lipping those up around the sides, but keeping the top exposed so that it can keep forming the bark. I went back to bed for a couple more hours and it continued to smoke. Finally, around 10 a.m., it was getting up to like 203 Fahrenheit, so I was getting ready to pull it off. I wanted to have this for lunch, so I wanted to rest it for a couple hours beforehand. Just as a last test, I take a thermometer and poke all around it to see how smooth it is. The first time I did that, it wasn't quite smooth everywhere. It had some rough parts. I probably left it in for like 30 more minutes, and then it was a little smoother, so I pulled it off at this point. Then the next step is super important, which is taking this and resting it. So I'm going to take this and put it in some butcher paper, which took me a really long time. But once that's securely wrapped up, you can put it in a towel and then stick this in a cooler, which my brother brought, thankfully. It just needs to sit for I think a minimum of 2 hours, but up to like 3 or 4 is good too. My family was over at this point, and then after that 2 hours was up, I was ready to cut into this. I like to separate the point from the flat where the grains change direction. And you can see some pretty nice juice spillage here. I don't know what's going on with the smoke ring. I thought sitting for like 13 hours in the smoke would do a better job. I don't know, but I just sliced the flat up into slices, and this is where you can check to see how tender it is. You just let it dangle over one of your fingers and it should be able to start falling under its own weight, but not break apart. This is definitely a little better than my first attempt in 2022, but still room for improvement. Then I just take the point and cut it up into kind of chunks. It kind of shreds on its own as I cut it anyway. But that's it. No taste test from me because I ate this with my family once again. Just another fun experiment with my charcoal smoker, which I'm still learning how to use. I do like the overnight method, but I don't know if I would do that every time. I definitely wouldn't do it without a thermometer to alarm me when it's getting too hot or too cold. But the best thing to do is actually get an electric pellet grill so it can regulate its own temperature. But I hope you enjoyed watching me make a brisket again. Thank you all for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
That's weird. I mean, Daddy's
Good.
had this in his ear, but
I
that was
know.
pre-cancer.